You know, I'm almost 40 years old. I'm actually, just about 4 months shy of that milestone, that terrifying milestone. But it's hilarious to me that at the age of 40, being about, like 17 years or so removed, or 15 or so, I don't want to even get depressed and count the number of years that I've been removed from college, but it's been a long time. And I can tell you, to all of the college students out there who have a reoccurring nightmare of there's a class that you forgot about the whole year, like you don't even know where it is on campus, and you are making fantastic grades in your other classes, but there's that one class that you totally forgot about, and you have taken no quizzes, no tests, nothing. There is a reason why that is such a nightmarish thing. You could be doing everything perfectly fine, and something like that would absolutely demolish, destroy, ruin your entire college career. And theoretically, if your college career is ruined, then your life is kind of ruined in a way. To all of you college kids out there, that is certainly a familiar nightmare. Am I correct? Well, I can tell you that as a almost 40-year-old man, I still get that nightmare, and frequently. I mean, hell, y'all, I just had one this past week, so just rest assured it will never go away. I'm sure I'm going to be 80 years old if I am lucky enough to live that long, having that freaking dream. But let's play around with this whole concept, okay? Let's take this idea of having a class that you totally forgot about, okay? But let's say that there's enough time, it's mid-semester or something, there's enough time to save the day, right? And so you finally figure out all the details to your class, you rush to your class late, you get there at about halfway through the lecture, you open the door, and this is what you hear.
Variables, just two quick things about kinematics. Scattering amplitudes are functions of helicity and momenta. We're going to do things maximally supersymmetrically, so all the helicities are unified into a supermultiplet, and they're labeled by a Grassmann parameter.
Now, there's probably only about 0.001% of you out there who understand what this guy is talking about.
Oh, and also, this infinite symmetry is totally obvious in this picture. It's just positive diffeomorphisms that keep you inside this positive Grassmannian.
For everyone else, we walk into a classroom like this, and we think, oh shit.
So indeed, everything is obvious. Okay?
There is no way in a billion years that my ass, who can barely do, I don't think I can do long division anymore. Like, forget it. And I totally sucked at algebra. There's no way that I'm going to survive 1 freaking second in this class.
Given any region P, you can talk about a certain 2 form which has logarithmic singularities on the boundary of that region.
If the quick drop deadline has not passed, I will be Q dropping this mofo faster than you can imagine. But we're not done with this nightmare, okay? Because this is a dream and we can kind of do anything we want, we're going to shift perspectives here. Actually, that sound effect was not good enough for a perspective shift. Let me try something else here. There we go. So now with our perspective fully shifted here, let's imagine a different kind of nightmare.
There's an even nicer way of talking about the external data.
A nightmare happening in the exact same classroom.
That takes advantage of a twistor representation.
But different.
Which,
instead of being the student that is just late for class.
All right. Now a little bit more.
You are instead the professor teaching particle physics.
So I'm going to talk about scattering amplitudes for gluons.
To a classroom full of unruly junior high school students. And you cannot leave the classroom.
So anyway,
until every single student knows everything about particle physics.
Of course, we have to start with step 1, and with my that should. Oops, what happened here?
Imagine how incredibly freaking hard that would be. I mean, trying to explain just a simple concept of particle physics to a classroom full of junior high students is about as difficult, if not more difficult, as coming up with all of particle physics by yourself. It's impossible. Could and would not ever happen. Ever. But if that freaked you out, imagine trying to teach all of that to even just one 2-year-old. It would be impossible to teach even the smartest 2-year-old to have ever lived. And so if you have a grasp of how hard that would be to teach particle physics to immature human beings that have the same brain and structural physiology, just less developed and less mature, imagine teaching that same material, particle physics, to an ant. Yes, that's right, everybody. We're back to this whole ant analogy, okay? So let's scoop up our ant brains that have just been splattered all over the place from the friggin' cosmic war that we covered in the last episode. Let's scoop up our brains, cram them back into our little exoskeleton skulls, if you want to call it that, in our little ant heads, and let's soldier on like an ant would do. Because despite the intensity of that last episode, it's really less than half of the full understanding of the infinite power of God. And the only real way that we're going to be able to understand is to attack the problem like an ant would. Just like an ant biting the finger of a human being, which is 4 million times larger than itself. We must approach this subject matter with equal courage and attack it one bite at a time. So that is what we're going to be doing today on this episode. This, the second installment, the second part of trying to unpack and understand God's true form, the waves of infinity, the waves of infinite power, the waves of beyond infinity that I described in my last ayahuasca trip. And once again, if you haven't listened to that trip episode, it's called Trip 10 Beyond Infinity. You absolutely need to go listen to it. It is unbelievable. It's so amazing. You got to listen. But then you got to listen to part 1 of this episode. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to follow along, and we won't have a clear understanding of God's infinite power so that we can bridge the next 5 incredibly deep subjects that were central themes of that trip. And if this is your first time joining us, you have to go back and listen to everything. Go to episode 1 and listen to everything. I'm sorry, you have to. This is my journey through the Pantheos. This isn't just my one experience of the Pantheos or my one day of the Pantheos. This is my journey. But for those of you who have followed along thus far, let's do it. Let's dive deeper into infinity. So that last episode of God and Ants Part 1, it covered 2 of the really big components of these waves of infinity that I keep explaining. It's really the scope and scale of what I saw and experienced that's the hardest thing to wrap your brain around. And thus, I did a full hour, 20 or 30 minute, however long it was, episode covering that. The immensity and the mind-warping, hyper-dimensionality, I don't even know if that's a word, that aspect of it, if you get an idea of that, you're starting to get an idea of just the scope and scale. And going hand in hand with those concepts is this unfathomably intense cosmic spiritual warfare that I saw, felt, experienced around me, flowing through me, just everything. It was unbelievably freaking incredibly intense. And you not only heard it, but you also heard an 1.5 hour unpacking episode about it. So we're going to take that all as understood. I may still touch on it a little bit to kind of emphasize some points going forward here, but we're going to put those concepts for the most part in our back pocket and understand them as being understood, and we're going to talk about other things that I experienced in these waves of infinity, because there are more things, a lot more things. In fact, you could say an infinite amount of more things. And things that, although related to the scope and scale and the infinite terror of this cosmic spiritual war, are nonetheless different. And although these things on their surface may seem less grandiose and less terrifying, understanding the full implications and overall gravity of these things is infinitely more terrifying than this cosmic spiritual war. In fact, it makes the cosmic spiritual war look like a friggin' joke. And so that begs the obvious question. What are they? What are these things that I speak of? And instead of just leading off with an analogy like I always do, this time I'm just going to tell you straight up. You see, you can think of these waves of God's true form as windows. Okay, I guess that's an analogy. Okay, but regardless, you can think of it as windows, and through these windows, I felt and saw things that I already described. Okay, the multiverse, something that seemed beyond the multiverse. Then there was these blasts of cosmic knowledge of how it all fit together and functioned. Of course, the spiritual warfare, and basically, for lack of better phraseology, other things that God was up to. Other things that he was doing, other work that it seems needs tending to. And I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but it bears emphasizing. Other things beyond our lives, our silly little planet Earth, and with it our solar system, our galaxy, our universe, even our friggin' multiverse, beyond even this cosmic war that is evidently the most serious thing in existence. Okay? It was very apparent through my experience, and it was just one of those things that my soul or my spirit just quote-unquote knew. It was very apparent that all of these things, all of these indescribably enormous and complicated things, they were all just a few of the infinite number of irons that God has in his infinite number of fires. Each of these irons and fires, by the way, being themselves infinite. Everything that we know and everything that we fancy, to be all that can be known is this cute little tucked away tiniest of tiny nooks that God has allowed to exist and seems to maintain as part of his, for lack of a better word, daily work. And this vision, this knowledge, and this understanding represented more than half of the experience. Like I said, the other stuff that I covered on the last episode, an hour and a half of describing scope and scale and terror of this cosmic war, that was a little speck of dust, y'all, of what God is up to. And again, this is one of those frustrating things where I have no way of telling you how I knew this, aside to say that my soul knew it. My soul understood it. It's as if my soul always understood this in a way, and that God was just simply reminding me of something that I already knew. But yeah, everything that we can conceive of in philosophy and science and religion and everything, y'all, seems to be this tiny little speck that God has, even stuff like heaven and hell, for crying out loud. It's this tiny little part, a tiny, tiny part of what God is dealing with overall. And the only way for me to kind of explain to you and have you understand what it felt like and what I'm getting at here is that we have to bring back our good friend, the humble ant, okay? So even though ants and humans actually do share a lot of activities that we both do, like, for example, ants engage in not only warfare, like I mentioned in the last episode, but also engineering, like they build their mounds and other structures and stuff like that. They also engage in agriculture, all right? They harvest, they grow and harvest fungus that they can feed to their larvae and stuff like that. They also engage in ranching, like they essentially raise aphids and feed off of these aphids. So, I mean, it's obvious that we do a lot of things that ants have been doing for millions of years before us. But it is equally obvious, y'all, that there are things that we do that go well beyond anything that an ant could possibly even conceive of with its tiny little hive mind ant brain and its world of pebbles and stones and twigs and leaves and stuff like that. Y'all, should we even compare the likes of an ant mound, even though from a feat of engineering from such a tiny creature to build such a complicated thing, can we even compare that to something like the International Space Station? To the James Webb Telescope? Quick answer, no. Not as quick answer, hell no. And, trying to teach an ant particle physics, that's one thing. That's an extreme example, obviously. I mean, there are billions and billions of actual human beings that could never even learn a little bit of particle physics either, okay? But the facts are, I mean, there are even very basic things that we do as humans that would absolutely blow the mind of an ant. In fact, the funny thing is it wouldn't even blow the mind of an ant because ants are so stupid that they wouldn't even know what they're looking at. And y'all, when I say the word stupid, what I'm really trying to say is comparatively stupid, okay? Ants have reached a homeostasis, a balance with their environment on how smart that they really need to be to survive. And really, every living being reaches this same balance, this homeostasis with how intelligent that they need to be to survive, because brain power and intellect is very taxing and consumes a lot of energy. And if you think that this does not apply to humans, you are wrong. I mean, let's just take something simple, like there's a glass of water in front of me, okay, right now. So there's an infinite amount of complexity in that glass of water. This glass of water is made up of individual atoms and subatomic particles and electrons, orbiting the atoms that all have a different spin and stuff like that associated with it. All of the way that light and stuff interacts with this glass and the reflection and refraction and all the atomic, the subatomic quantum mechanics properties and functions or whatever that allow that to happen. There's any number of things. It's an infinite amount of information, y'all, in just a simple thing like a glass of water. And if we had to know all the infinite details, because we're talking infinity, we would need an infinite amount of energy to do that. And so to conserve energy, because energy is absolutely precious, right? We cut corners in the sense of papering over something like a glass of water as an object that has meaning. We don't need to know every single detail about this to understand what it is and what it does. It is a thing that holds water that you can turn, like a angle towards your mouth, and then this water goes into your mouth and then into your belly. It's simply a tool to put water in your belly. And I could go on and on about this, y'all, but my whole point here is that humans do the same thing. We've reached a homeostasis that makes sense from a biological ecosystem evolutionary perspective here on how smart we need to be given our different parameters around us. And as much as I hate to say this, because I do respect ants, right, they're friggin' stupid, okay? Especially compared to us, but they're friggin' stupid. And just a little example of how stupid they are. I was listening to a podcast one time where they had an entomologist. Etymology is a study of words. Entomology is a study of insects. And so this entomologist was on this podcast, and he was talking about this time that he was studying this ant, right? Monitoring its behavior or something, right? And something happened to this ant. I don't remember what, but it injured itself like very badly and ended up splitting its abdomen open, and its ant guts, all right, his viscera, spilled out. And the ant, even though it was gravely injured, thought, oh, wow, he smelled food, essentially, in the form of his own viscera, and started feasting on his own viscera, eating his own guts. I don't know what y'all think about that, but to me, that's pretty stupid. But my point here is that even though the collective hive mind of a colony of ants can be somewhat impressive in the insect world, like they're able to achieve feats that you're like, wow, that's really cool for an insect. They're dumb, y'all, and that's not an insult to the ant. They are in homeostasis with their environment. They're balanced with how much knowledge they need given to survive and what the energy trade-offs are therein. But if you think that we're done here and that is the full extent of my analogy, well, then you have not listened to me enough yet on my podcast. I highly recommend you go back and listen to more. But anyway, so we're not done, okay? So remember the entomologist that I mentioned earlier, okay? So let's imagine that you are that person, okay? You're an entomologist who specializes in ants. And let's say that you find an ant, a single ant, But not just any single ant. Let's say that you have found the smartest ant that has ever existed or will ever exist on this planet. Okay, like this ant is the ant equivalent of the combination of Archimedes, Isaac Newton, Einstein, like any of the smart brainiac scientist dudes or whatever that you want to throw into a mixing bowl. It's the combination. But remember, it's the equivalent. Okay, it's still an ant. It's the equivalent of the limits that an ant can reach, okay, as an ant. And let's further assume here that you are the Albert Einstein of entomology, okay? So much so that you are not only able to 100% speak fluent ant speak, like their language, which is pheromones, basically, but you also have some kind of device that you can hook up to an ant that can translate human words to pheromones and vice versa, so that this little device is a perfect translator between you and the ant. Okay, so you following me here? All right, this is already crazy, but here's where it gets crazier. Okay, so you rig up your little device to this the smartest ant to have ever lived and will ever live, right? And you say hello to it. And of course, the ant freaks out because there is something that's 4 million times larger than it that just told it hello in its own language. So she freaks out, and when she's done, freaking out and she's calmed down a little bit, y'all begin to talk. And you're a good entomologist. You're smart, smart for a human at least. And you know that if you hit this ant over the head with something like particle physics, like right out the gate here, that she will be completely lost from the start and you'll really get nowhere. So you decide to pick a subject where there's some common ground, okay? You decide to lead with the concept of work. And that is friggin' perfect. I mean, after all, that's really the only thing that ants do. Work is the most familiar topic to them. So you begin by asking the ant to describe what it does for work. And it says something basically like, hey, well, I'm a female and I'm not the queen. I'm a worker ant, okay? You see, we have a queen, and her only job is to, and then you cut it off right there. You cut her off mid-sentence because you actually already know everything that ants do because you've been studying them your whole life as an entomologist. And so you're like, yeah, the queen's only job is to, be pregnant and lay eggs, and the male's only job is to mate with her, and then your job as a worker is to do basically everything else. Defend the nest, hunt and forage, tend to and feed the larva, stuff like that. Sound about right? And you look down at the ant, and after the translator translates everything you just said, you see that the ant is absolutely flabbergasted that you know absolutely everything about ant society. A society that the ant thinks is highly complicated and sophisticated. It cannot believe its ears. Oh, actually, ants don't have ears. It's antenna. It cannot believe its antenna. And while it's at the peak of its, being shocked, your friend comes into the room, right, and introduces himself and lets the ant know that he's going to take her to work with him today, and that this, so that the ant can see what human work is like. And so your friend scoops up the little ant in his hand, and they get in a taxi cab, and they ride through Manhattan to the port of New York City, where your friend works in maritime logistics at the port. Y'all, we're talking super tankers, giant cranes, giant cargo ships, like anything freaking huge that you'll see in a modern port. And granted, this ant is actually familiar with supplies and logistics. I mean, that's one of her jobs as a worker. But the difference in scope and scale of the port of New York, with beings that are 4 million times the size of her, operating equipment that in some cases is 4 million times the size of the human that's operating it, the difference here is incomprehensible to an ant. And so the poor little ant's mind is blown, and during the lunch break, instead of having a lunch, your friend takes the little ant to the airport, and the ant gets on a freaking airplane and flies to Washington, D.C., where she meets up with another friend of yours, a judge, one of 9 judges in the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court. And the ant spends the rest of the day watching the proceedings and trying to figure out what the freak is going on and which way is up in this absolutely alien landscape. So, I mean, I tried my best to find the best examples of human jobs that would actually blow an ant's mind. And I think that those are almost perfect. Okay, maritime logistics is somewhat relatable to an ant, but it's off the charts mind-blowing in terms of scope and scale. Okay, obviously we can agree to that, y'all. But it's the Supreme Court justice job, the one I just kind of threw away at the end there, y'all. A job that is not very, visually impressive compared to the Port of New York. That's the one that would be the most mind-blowing. I mean, the abstractness, the whole concept of governing bodies, the rule of law, the Constitution, legal precedents, like et cetera, it is so abstract and out there compared to the world of an ant that the ant would not even begin to come close to understanding even the tiniest little modicum, the tiniest little detail. In large part, everything that I just mentioned, the rule of law, governing bodies, the Constitution, these are things that only exist in our minds. And I know what some of you are thinking out there, but Andrew, the Constitution is an actual document. And it's like, sure, but hand that document, hand the Constitution to an ancient Viking, okay? And watch how quickly they use it for tinder in their campfires, okay? That document is just a collection of thoughts that are supposed to be the embodiment of the greater good. And the fact that human beings treat thoughts as real things, things that are so real that you can create entire occupations and careers and sectors, the government sector, y'all, is like an industry, it's not technically an industry, but you get what I'm saying. It's like a whole occupational career structure apparatus kind of thing called the government sector. And it's all formulated and created around just human thoughts, y'all. And that notion of creating work around just something tangible that puts food on your table around human thought is an absolutely alien and abstract construct that is absolutely unique in the animal kingdom. Okay, an ant, there's no way that they could ever freaking even begin to conceive of that. So yeah, compared to an ant, y'all, this is absolutely mind-blowing. It's not in the same ballpark. It's not even in the same league. It's not even in the same universe, this kind of thinking. But y'all, there are parts of that story that I didn't highlight or delve into that are downright terrifying, okay? I want you to focus on something very important in this story, okay? I want you to focus on you, the entomologist. As an entomologist, you naturally love ants, all right? And you are essentially serving as the ambassador for this ant in this little experiment of yours. But this poor ant, it never asked you how you knew everything about ant society, all right? It doesn't know, it has no conception that one of the millions of occupations that a human can do, and it's to put food on their table, is the freaking study of freaking ants. And if you told it that, and it was something that it could even comprehend, it may not be able to recover from such a mind-bending fact, y'all. But here's another mind-bending fact that the ant definitely would not be able to recover from. Part of being an entomologist and studying ants means killing ants. Killing ants in droves. You see, one of the things that an entomologist does, y'all, is taxonomy. Basically collecting and categorizing specimens. And it's sad to say this, but it's best to collect these specimens post-mortem, okay, dead. But that's just the taxonomy part of this, y'all. There are other times when entomologists need to kill insects for higher causes, okay, like protecting our food supply, or even protecting ourselves directly in terms of preventing the spread of infectious disease. For those, for us in the South here, we see mosquito trucks spraying the stagnant water all the time, killing mosquito larvae, y'all, because malaria is a real thing. West Nile virus is a real thing. And I know that I'm screwing up a lot of stuff here. I'm sure there's some entomologists out there listening to me that are like, dude, you got a lot of this wrong. But the one thing I definitely didn't get wrong is that insects are definitely killed by entomologists in the course of their work for the greater good. Basically, y'all, either which way you slice it here, killing insects is essential and overall, in a paradoxical way, good. And this poor ant, our poor little ant friend that we had for this experiment or whatever, is caught up in the gears of a higher purpose, a greater good. And that cold, hard fact, given the as above, so below fractal nature of reality, and how ants do in fact metaphorically resemble humans in a lot of ways, that fact should not only concern you, it should scare the ever-loving shit out of you. I mean the ever-loving shit out of you. And so this is where we transition from me talking on this awesome microphone with really good audio quality to a crappy voice memo thing that I recorded I think a week or so after that ayahuasca experience. I was contemplating this whole, comparative ant analogy, and I had this amazingly deep and profound thought that entered into my head, and I had to capture it. And so I'm going to just play it because I can't really recreate that magic. So I apologize for the audio quality. The friggin' air conditioner is running the entire time, and I'm sorry for that. So you'll hear like a noise in the background. Anyway, let's play it. Here we go. So I want to talk today about the concept of the greater good and relate it to how God has infinite power and we don't. And so it's kind of like just right at the beginning of this conversation, it's like I'm setting us up, I'm teeing us up so that it's very clear that we are infinitely inferior to God. Okay? So God has infinite power and we simply do not. Okay? So right off the bat, there is a pretty overwhelming imbalance here, right? But we're gonna talk about the greater good and concepts like fairness and stuff like that, right? And this is going to tie into my experience that I had on trip number 10 about witnessing infinity and God's wrath kind of thing. And I had a thought pop into my head a second ago and then, by the way, I used to have this same thought, and this thought is also, adopted and espoused by the public intellectuals, Neil deGrasse Tyson's of the world, the freaking Lawrence Krauss, Richard Dawkins, and folks like that, right? And it's this concept of like, and again, I used to make this argument of God doesn't seem like a very nice guy, wiping out of entire populations and stuff that you hear about in the Old Testament and everything. And, you get people that are kind of like, well, God seems like a prick, right? That's not the kind of God that I would want. And you're kind of almost semi-protesting God in that regard. And I used to be one of those people. God just didn't seem like a very nice fella, and that's not how I would run things, right? You hear like I'm putting myself above God in that sentence there. You hear that? And so now that I've experienced what I've experienced on trip number 10, where I saw and felt the infinite power of God blasted into my skull for 2.5 hours, and it was the most terrifyingly amazing, but more so terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. And I've been to hell a few times on these trips, y'all. So more intense, more scary than hell, seeing infinity. And not only, it wasn't even infinity, it was like an infinite amount of infinity. It's like take infinity and then stack infinity of those infinities on top of that. That's and it's weird. It's hard to say. It's hard to express this. It was even more than that, y'all. So take an infinite amount of infinities, and it was even more than that. Our little concept of infinity, which is the multiverse, is the first step in what I saw. The first step. So all I got to say to someone that harbors these ideas and these thoughts of like God is kind of a prick and I wouldn't run things like that, and he's going to have to answer to me about his immoral way he runs the universe. It's like just go and keep that argument and go and try to level that argument against the face of infinity. An infinite amount of infinity. And times infinity. All of that times infinity again. Go and argue that in the face of that and see where it gets you. I had this amazing thought earlier, okay? Let's imagine that you're the president of the United States, okay? And let's say that there is a crisis, a food crisis, like we're apparently running up against a food shortage, right? Or butting up against one, right? Let's imagine things get really bad, and we have to suddenly commission a whole bunch of grasslands out in the prairies or whatever to now be new farmland, okay? And the president issues an executive order to make this happen. It's like, hey, we're now taking X amount of million acres in national preserves, and we're going to make them farmland because we are all dying or something like that. This is extreme of extremes, right? And let's say that all the construction crews and stuff come out there to start tilling and the land or whatever. Now imagine that you are an ant in an ant bed that is going to get churned up and chewed up, and your population of ants is going to get wiped out, essentially, because a bunch of humans are like, we want food, and we're going to till up the land, and we're going to destroy and kill, essentially, your entire ant colony and pretty much all the other ant colonies out here as well. Let's say that you're an ant, you're the most genius ant to have ever lived, and you somehow get knowledge of this is going to happen, and your ant colony is going to get wiped out. And you are somehow able to go and have an audience with the president and lay out your case as to why it's important that you keep your ant colony. Like, and you have like these brilliant ant logic arguments that you have in your tool belt. You're like, man, there is no way that he is going to be able to deny the little the chemical scent receptor things that we send to each other. Like that's a beautiful, that's a harmonious community, and we're good ants, and we have our little eggs in our little dens. And those are very important, So, guys, I'm trying to think like an ant, but let's imagine that you can articulate and wheel out these amazingly profound, deep, and beautiful arguments, and very, very logical arguments as to why, this ant stuff is super important, and therefore you should not wipe out our colony to make food for people. Do you see what I'm getting at, y'all? There are so many things above and beyond an ant's mind going on in the world that it's all, I hate to say it, that any argument that an ant comes up and says to me is null and void, especially when we're talking about I need to feed my family. I'm going to look at that president and say, hey, this is an ant. I don't care what this thing says. He's an ant. There are bigger and so like and that seems very harsh, y'all. But think about this: humans we have the capacity and intelligence to create other. We can clone that whole ant colony and build it somewhere else. We can make a utopia for ants in repayment for their sacrifice. It's like, hey. You tell the ant, like, hey, look, buddy, I'm sorry. We got to do this. We got to save humanity because we're the dominant species. And by the way, I go back to this video that I saw. It's a hilarious video. It's Maddox, the internet satirist, right? Infamous internet satirist. He did this video about how, basically running down veganism and vegetarianism, saying like, it was like animals are people too. And he was like, no, they're not. Like, an animal does not have the intellectual capacity and nor the resources and faculty to be able to stop an asteroid or comet from hitting the Earth. Humans, on the other hand, do. We have knowledge that surpasses and goes so far beyond that of the animal. I don't care which animal you point at. Oh, dolphins are smarter. No, they're not. No, they're not. They are not smarter than people. Show me the technology that they've made. But his point is like, we can stop an asteroid or a comet from hitting this Earth and wiping out everything. So if we want to eat you, then shut up and get on our plates and then into our bellies. And that's a very harsh thing to say, y'all. But I'm eating my own words now because that was very harsh. Okay, I actually really do. I still eat meat, but I respect. Growing up the way I grew up, y'all, you hunt or you fish. An animal has given their life for you to maintain yours. That is something to be, it's a sacred thing. It's something to be honestly kind of worshipped in a way. That's why we give thanks. I'm going to take another sip of coffee here. Anyway, my point that I'm getting at here is humans have the capacity, not that we're doing a greater good, right? But we have the capacity to do a greater good. Keeping a human alive, if a human is doing good, could do wonders for the planet instead of terrors, right? So if an ant colony needs to be wiped out so that humans can survive, I would say that is good, given that humans are doing good, which they're not right now, kind of, but that's a whole nother story. But that's what I'm getting at here when I'm talking about people that have a really burr in their ass about the concept of God wiping out people, Old Testament God like wiping out people, or the whole concept of God's wrath in the first place. Like, if God is all love, then why is he angry at us? Well, guess what? Love is so much. There are so many factors and facets to love. If you think that it's always just pure joy and bliss, you are gravely mistaken. There is a concept of tough love, y'all. And tough love for humans is the closest thing you can get to it's the closest thing in love that you can get to a sin. Tough love borders and fringes on wrath. And it's God's wrath, y'all. Tough love is God's wrath. So what I'm saying here is we are ants, and we have all of these logical things. We can wheel out, you can bring the smartest group of PhD this and the wisest group of mystics that, and get them to agree and collaborate on something that is, the most mystical and most scientific and most logical argument that you could possibly construe for the human race. And you can wheel that out to God and say, have mercy on us because of this. And guess what? That is an argument of an ant wheeling out its best ant logic to a human when they are needing to create farm acreage to save humanity. There are things going on beyond humans that we will never understand. Based on what I saw in Trip 10, there is an infinite amount of complexity beyond us, and there are things that need to be done up there that just be thankful God hasn't already wiped us out, y'all. because the reasons for things up beyond us are far more serious than our little ant problems down here. I guarantee you that. Every time I have peered into what's beyond our mere human stuff, and I got to see what's going on behind the scenes, up and above, into the infinite kind of thing. Not only has it almost killed me every time, but the only word that I can use to describe how impactful it was is the word serious. It is the most serious thing that I have ever imagined in my entire life. It's like, let's think about it like this. Let's think about, like, I don't know. Let's think about the most serious thing that can happen to us on the planet. I just mentioned comets and asteroids hitting the planet, right? Let's imagine that we found a friggin' asteroid that was big enough to kill everything on the planet. Let's say it was, like, I don't know, 3 times the size of Baptistina. A lot of people think it's Chicxulub that was the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs and everything. That's actually the impact crater is called Chicxulub. The asteroid, I know I'm being all smarty pants here. I apologize. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs and stuff was called Baptistina. So let's imagine that we found an asteroid, I don't know, 10 times the size of Baptistina. So 10 times the size of Mount Everest, roughly. That's 10 times more the killing capacity that wiped out a whole world of dinosaurs, y'all. Dinosaurs were around for hundreds of millions of years. Like, I think it was like 180 million years, y'all. Wiped them out in hours. There is nothing in the fossil record that shows that any large non-avian dinosaur survived. There is nothing. Anyways, what am I getting at? Oh, so let's imagine that we found one of these giant asteroids heading to Earth, and we only have, I don't know, like a half a year to rectify the situation. Would that not instantly be the most important thing that humanity has ever faced? Answer, yes. It's like, it's not only you that are going to die. It's not only you and your family, you and your friends. It's you and everyone and every living organism on the planet is going to die in 6 months. That's what I'm talking about serious, y'all. That weighing down feeling, that sinking feeling, that oh my God, this is the most, like, legit thing. I'm trying to think of words that besides serious. That is a tiny inkling of how serious what I saw on the other side is. Every time that I've peered into what's going on back there, or was allowed to see, it's freaking serious, y'all. And our lives and our souls are caught up in that. And there's what I can tell you from what I can gather is something is going on behind the scenes that is a straight up all out war. And our souls are caught up in that. It's a terrifying reality. Terrifying. And it's something beyond us. I would imagine it's just as terrifying if you got an ant out of its little ant world and threw it into...
And I'm cutting this next part out here, y'all, because this is when I get into the analogy of dropping an ant into the Battle of Stalingrad. I did a full episode basically on that on the last episode, so we're going to skip that part. But do definitely suffice it to say that that's how intense it was. Okay, like, I'm not joking around when I talk about how serious it is and the seriousness level and the scope and scale level being that analogy, dropping an ant into the most intense human warfare to have ever happened. And it's one thing to think or realize this or interpret it from my experience, because again, everything was so insanely abstract. Really, the only thing I can rely on here is that my soul and my spirit, understood what the reality was. And so that begs the question, like, how do I know for certain? Like, can I double down? Can I stand 10 toes down on this and say that that's exactly what the interpretation is? It's true. Like, what I extrapolated and understood, what my soul understood, is the reality. And the only way I can answer that is to say that, again, I know this is friggin' annoying, but my soul understood it. Like, I don't need to question this because I just know it. It's true. But if you want something a little bit more concrete, again, unfortunately, I still have to rely on something that's open to interpretation. But I'd have to lean on these synchronicities that I received in the months after this realization. And keep in mind that most people may look at synchronicities and be like, oh, it's just coincidence, right? I mean, I understand. I used to be like you. That was my explanation for this kind of stuff too. But nowadays, I look at synchronicities as a wink, like a little nod from God, basically saying like, hey, yeah, it's either you're on the right path or you understood correctly. It's kind of like a wink and a nudge and a gotcha, buddy kind of thing from God. And I rely on these as the proof, essentially, that my thinking and my interpretations and my path and stuff is correct. And so coming out of the actual ayahuasca trip itself, there was that unbelievably bone-chilling, crazy synchronicity event involving the mile marker 666 on the highway. The person who died there about a year before that, and there was that crucifix on the side of the road indicating exactly where she died, and then I went and looked it up, and then I heard my own name in the eulogy video, and the person says, "We love you, infinity." Now, so like that was a big one. That was kind of like, hey, like basically for me, it was a wink from God saying like, hey, all that was real. And there were some other synchronicities surrounding that were pretty cool also, but it was when I was sitting down and gathering all the details of the trip and starting to get ready to record the episode, the actual episode, which I recorded it months and months later. It was gathering all the stuff for that when I started getting some other synchronicities.
Hey there, Aquarius. Welcome to your reading for the week.
And a few of them were these tarot card videos. Again, I've started watching these tarot card videos. I don't watch a lot of them. There's only two people that I really focus on that are the tarot card people, and I just watch their videos for Aquarius. And I encountered this one.
Let's see here, Aquarius. Does look like a good reading to me here.
And as I'm watching the video, my mind is kind of drifting. I'm daydreaming a little bit, and I'm starting to think about infinity, honestly, and how I'm going to encapsulate it and cram it into an episode. And while I'm thinking about infinity, this is what I hear.
You start off with the Magician. I kind of feel like there's a new beginning coming in for you. I also am very focused on his infinity symbol, this figure 8 that he has on his head here. It kind of represents a lot of things in the tarot. It can represent infinity. It can represent an equal exchange of energy, like the figure 8 symbol. It's energy out, energy back. And it can also kind of represent as above, so below as well.
I mean, come on, y'all. Right when I'm thinking about the word infinity, he says infinity here. And then he gets into this whole concept of, like, in the tarot, a big part of this infinity symbol means as above, so below. It's like, hello, that's the point of this whole thing. That's the whole reason why I'm doing these analogies of ants and people, is because just like the relationship of an ant to a person and the crazy disparities there's even a bigger disparity between us and God. Like, that's the whole point. As above, so below. To a just cold-blooded statistician, that may not seem like a very impressive thing at all, just mere coincidence. But to me, that was a big one. But there was another video that guy released a few days later. Like he does like double, like one video will be like the week of this week, and then the next video will be like the full month of August or something like that. And it was this video that freaked me out even more.
Hey there, Aquarius. Welcome to your reading for...
And so keep in mind, at this point, I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to string together this episode. I remembered I had that unbelievable kind of thought in my trip about being like an ant, you know, and I was like, maybe I could do this whole thing like focused and centered around ants. And again, while I'm watching this particular tarot card video, that's where my brain is at. That's where I'm daydreaming about, you know, trying to formulate how I'm going to do this, and it's all talking about ants. And that's when I hear this.
Like, you know, there might be some things that you think nobody cares about, but maybe if you did it, they would care about it. It's like, and what the hell am I talking about? It's like, I don't know, maybe you want to study ants for the rest of your life. Most people might be saying, ants are useless, you know, ants are tiny little bugs, but you never know. You might start some YouTube channel about ants and become super successful because of it, right? You never know.
Now, granted, this guy is talking to me on YouTube, so when he starts searching for his own analogies of things to people to relate to about their occupations, their jobs, his mind kind of drifts to YouTube land. So it's not necessarily that amazing that he went for a YouTube video for his analogy, but a YouTube video about ants. I mean, it's freaking crazy specific to what I'm trying to do. Like very, very crazy specific. So just one more of these tarot card synchronicity things, I promise. This one is really cool. This one's actually kind of my favorite, honestly. And this happened about 2.5, maybe 3 weeks ago when I was first starting to record the Of God and Ants Part 1 episode.
Aquarius, thank you for tuning in to Perfectly Imperfect Tarot.
So if you recall in that episode, I was very heavy on hyperdimensional space and stuff like that. And I kept talking about, you know, how we need to think of space-time as, you know, 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, so it's like 4D. And I kept saying, like, we're going to be talking about 5D space and 5D entities, like talking to us and whatnot. So, you know, throughout that episode and throughout that whole month for me of recording that episode, it was 5D, 5D, 5D. And on the day where I did the most dimensional intensive recording, I sat down, took a break, and I turned this on.
Crown the energy. Knight of Swords. Yeah, you're getting the message, the communication. You know, somebody already told you. Somebody told you in the 3D, or your angels and ancestors told you in the 5D.
And this one is just flat out like in my face telling me that I'm understanding the truth. I mean, it's like I'm getting the message, the communication I know, and it was not only told to me like in the 3D, but in the 5D. And not only that, told to me in the 5D by my angels and ancestors. Okay? But it's not that part that gives me goosebumps, y'all. Makes the hair stand up on end, or whatever they call it. Freaks me out, scares me, terrifies me. It's what she says next.
Somebody told you in the 3D, or your angels and ancestors told you in the 5D. Okay? Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Period. The tower is, look, hello? It's coming. Man, I'm telling you guys, I don't know what's going on. But I just, I pray for all of us, for mercy, for guidance, protection. I pray for all of us to keep us near the cross, because the storm is not in question at this point. And the storm is coming. It's already in the plan. It's a part of the plan, and it's required for the plan. So there's going to be those that'll get caught up and swept up, and you're trying not to be one of them. And you know what? Shamalama, mother loving ding dong. Okay.
And no comment there, except to say, God have mercy on us. And so we're done with the tarot card synchronicities, okay? But we're not done with synchronicities altogether yet. This next one, y'all, is a punch right in the face. And it was so much of a punch in the face that I had to take out my phone and start video recording what I was witnessing, because I couldn't believe my freaking eyes. And if you're not listening to me on YouTube right now, I highly suggest that at some point you at least go and watch this particular part of the video, because I'm going to be showing the actual footage that was shot in the moment. And so let's go back to this past July when I was in Europe.
We're going down. We're in Conca de Marini.
And so this is where we get back to that cliffhanger.
We're going to go down to the water taxi, and then we're taking it to Amalfi.
Where I left us on part 1.
And then at Amalfi, we're going to catch the bus to Bombe something.
I'm walking down some stairs in the beautiful, quaint city of Conca de Marini in the Amalfi Coast in Italy. And I am in deep contemplation about the hook that I'm going to use for the Trip 10 episode. Very quickly, I thought of the analogy of ant warfare. And no joke, as I'm sitting down for dinner in this restaurant, having that thought of ant warfare, on the table, in front of me, are 2 ants engaged in ant warfare. And I'm like, holy moly, this is a freaking crazy synchronicity right here. Right when I'm thinking about ant warfare, it's playing itself out on the table right in front of me. And the crazy thing is, and something to put this into perspective for you, if I didn't look down at that particular spot on the table, I would have never even noticed. But the thing is, even after noticing, I still completed my dinner and enjoyed it. So think about this. While us humans are up here laughing and joking and drinking and going about our merry way and having a beautiful, fun dinner, there is a war, a fight for survival, a literal life and death struggle just inches away from us. And nobody cared. And something very interesting happened during the course of this battle. Something that put everything into even bigger perspective for me. I'm sitting there watching these ants just ripping each other apart. And one ant in particular is getting the worst of this battle. I mean, it is getting just mutilated down there. And I had this moment where I wanted to break the ants up, like break their fight up. And I kind of started to reach down with my finger in an attempt to do that. But then I realized that my finger is so big and I am so powerful in comparison to these tiny ants that me trying to save their lives would kill them. I, as a human, am simply too powerful to even help, despite my willingness to do so. After having that thought, I looked up to my wife and her friend, who are oblivious.
I want to do another caprese salad.
And they should be. We're just enjoying a dinner, after all.
Caprese.
Okay.
Caprese.
And bruschetta with tomato and mozzarella.
And I'm utterly amazed.
Right, everything is tomatoes and like...
And right then, at the peak of my amazement, our waitress came over. Our 12-year-old waitress came over to get our dessert order. She glanced down at the table, noticed a couple of ants curled up into a ball fighting each other, and in an act of stewardship and cleanliness, inconspicuously and nonchalantly squished the 2 ants between her fingers and flicked their bodies onto the ground below. Y'all, not only is that a perfect microcosm and a perfect analogy for everything that I'm trying to describe, but it's also one of the most bone-chilling synchronistic winks from God that I've ever gotten, letting me know that my interpretation of everything, not only was everything that happened to me real, but everything that I interpreted from what happened to me is also valid. And if you don't believe that, I kind of don't care, because this is my journey through the Pantheos, and you had better believe that I believe. And so, with that being said and understood, what does all of this mean? What are the takeaways? What is the after-action review for those of you in the military? What are the lessons learned for those of you in the corporate world? Like, just what's up? And to address that, we return to that voice memo.
Y'all, if you think that you, with your human little zombie ant logic, can think in the same sphere and realm of God, you are way off. You are you are infinity off. You get on your knees and you worship. Even if you think that God is a prick, he's God. Go make your arguments to God with his thumb on top of you. You yell all you want at that thumb before it crushes you. With infinite power. That being said, God still loves you. I know that what I just said makes it sound like he does not at all, y'all. But that's what's so amazing about God, is that when you go and when you have anyone who has had a deep, beautiful religious experience involving God, they know exactly what I'm talking about. When you feel and see and feel and all the above, every sense and emotion that you have, when you experience God's love, it's the most love you've ever experienced in your entire life. And it made me realize one day what it would be like for someone to pull off the most romantic gesture of all time. Like if someone knew so much about you that they found the most, like maybe things you've never even told people because they're so intimate and close to your heart, that these things someone knew about that, and they devised this incredibly elaborate but simple, because God is always simple in his elaborateness. So elaborately simple is another word for perfect, right? This person builds out this perfect romantic gesture pivoted around this amazing, beautiful, very intimate thing that happened to you in your life that means the most to you in the world. And they roll out this beautiful, perfect, romantic gesture where you're like, man, it must have taken this person their whole lives to devise such a romantic gesture. And it is the most heartbreakingly humbling, amazing feeling you can ever have in your entire life. And I'm tearing up right now because you have to tear up in the face of such beauty. It's the human's response. We can't take the emotion. God has so much love for us, despite us being tiny little ants. Less than ants, y'all. The relationship of humans to ants is far much of a smaller margin than the relationship between God and people. In fact, it's an infinitely smaller margin, the comparison between the two. Yet God still loves us, and loves us so much that despite the infinity times infinity times infinity times an infinite amount of infinities, and then multiply that by infinity, despite that which God has to work with, he still is fully devoted and fully engaged in your life and wants you to be a better person. And so when you look at the bad things that have happened in your life, y'all, God has set the stage for there to be both good and evil in the world. We don't know why. I have a great theory about it, but ultimately we don't know why. But to me, it's part of a test. And some of us get tested more harshly than others. And again, if you think that these tests are unfair, all I got to say is you're an ant making ant logic arguments to a human. I'm going to be like, I don't care. I don't like what you think is suffering doesn't equate to suffering in my world here, my human world. And we will understand that when we are on the other side. We will look back at our petty little suffering. I don't care how bad the suffering was, y'all. We will look back on that and be like, oh, wow, we thought that was bad? Woo! Anyways, I lost my train of thought here. I was talking about... Man, what was I talking about? I was on a roll, man, and I lost my train of thought. God has... God has... And not only does God have love for us, he has an infinite amount of love for us, y'all, because God is infinity and God is love, and there you have it. And it's a fractal nature of this love. It's like that love exists an infinite amount in the infinite, but also going down into the infinitely small. It's the same amount of infinity packed in. God is everywhere. God is love, and God is everywhere. And again, when we talk about this this concept of God loves us, right? But he wants us to be a better person, and we're going to be tested, and we're going to be tested in some cases very harshly. Think of it like a drill sergeant. Think about being in the military. I know a lot of you have no military experience, but just conceive of this thought for a second. Just entertain this thought. I was in kind of the military. I say kind of because I was in ROTC, but didn't get into the military. But we went through some intense. It has nothing on combat. So all you veterans out there, I'm a pussy. Okay, I'll admit it flat outright. But the torture that we went through physically and mentally, specifically my freshman year at A&M, was intense. We had military advisors for our unit, and one of them was a Green Beret Army Ranger, and he was like, hey, he straight up said like, hey, you guys, what you're going through here is like Ranger School, and anyone who's been through Ranger School knows that it's friggin' hardcore. Okay, so why am I talking about that? Just trust me that I understand like a very intense boot camp kind of situation. And that's my whole point is boot camp. We are in boot camp, y'all. And God is our drill sergeant. Now, there are, a few types of people in boot camp, like the privates or whatever that you want to call them, like the grunts that are being instructed and whatever. See, the goal of the Army is to put you through boot camp and make you a resilient, strong leader, an awesome person. And they're going to put you through trials and tribulations and give you a stressful environment in order to build you up, build your character, build you into a soldier. And while you're in boot camp, you can sit there and bemoan your existence and cry and complain and say, I hate this, I hate that. I really hate our drill sergeant because it's our drill sergeant who's yelling at me, making me do all this stuff and yelling at me. And so you can sit there and bellyache and whine and complain and just hate your life and make it worse. Because either way, you're going to complete boot camp unless you just quit, right? Like a total pussy. So you can make it worse because you're negative, and you're going to end up being a terrible, crappy soldier. A worse person, keep in mind. Or
you can realize that these things that are happening to you are shaping you. The intention is to shape you into being a better person, a better soldier. And you look at this drill sergeant who, yes, is putting you through hell and is yelling at you. And you can flip the script in your head to look at this drill sergeant in a different light and say, like, you know what? He is testing me. He is seeing how far I can go and trying to mold me into a better person. And you need to thank your drill sergeant. And when you graduate from boot camp, guess what? Your drill sergeant turns into this regular person who's nice and sweet, usually. And you get to have a friggin' beer. I don't know if they do in the actual military, but it's just like, imagine like sitting down and having a beer with your drill sergeant afterwards. That's what happens. And so it's what happened in the Corps with us. Our sophomore drop party, sophomores are pissheads, or what they call them. They're the drill sergeants. You have this drop party where it's a long story, blah, 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 but you get to finally talk to the fish. That's our version of privates or whatever. You finally get to talk to the fish as a regular person, and they call it dropping handles, and you don't have to put on the charade of, I'm a drill sergeant and you're a fish. You're just like, hey, man, by the way, you've been calling me Mr. McNevin all year? I'm Andrew. What's your name? And then you have a beer where you literally have a beer. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. Now, granted, there's a lot of stuff that you have to go through that night to get to have a beer. But anyway, thank your drill sergeant, y'all. There's a reason why he's putting us through what he's putting us through. And I really hope that those of you who are really going through intense struggles, because, man, I went through my own struggles, and everything is relative, right? So to me, my struggles were intense. But y'all, I have friends that I have friends, y'all, who, one of them in particular has let out a couple of things as a joke that has happened to him. Like, we'll be joking around about something, and this person will throw out something that sounds like a joke that is a story about his life. And it sounds like it's a joke, but he's also hinted. And so, like, me and my other friends would laugh at it and be like, oh, that's funny. He's telling this story about like how, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into the story, right? But he'll say these stories as a joke, and he'll even laugh about them, and he won't even let on that they're a real story, but they are. And all I gotta say, y'all, is that there are people out there that are going through some serious, and have been through and are still going through some serious stuff. Anytime you think that you have it hard, anyone can wheel out 10, 20 people that have it much harder than you. And that doesn't mean to diminish anything that you've went through, any of your struggles, but just know that there are people out there that have it bad. And you talk about emotional scarring, bad, y'all. And I can totally understand, and I used to be able to appreciate. I guess I could still appreciate. I can entertain the thought, right? I can totally understand someone like that not being too thrilled about this God guy. They've been picked on by the drill sergeant a little too hard. And it's going to be damn near impossible. It's going to take a miracle to turn these people around in that regard. And they don't even want to be turned around. Again, these are the people that are like, no, this God guy, I've seen what he's all about. No, thank you. I can tell y'all that it's going to sound like, yeah, right. Right? Like from someone like me who hasn't gone through as intense struggles as you have,
you're going to be like, yeah, right. But I'm telling you that there is an answer for you. There is a redemption and there is a glory for you, that you can be saved from all these terrible things. And not only stuff that you're going through right now, you can be saved from your past as well. And you can look at your past as in a completely different light and completely new perspective and be like, I'm okay. And you would stay okay. The redeeming power of God's love and grace. And I just pray that these people, each one of them, would have a moment to realize and understand that. And a lot of times it's never on our time. It's always on God's time. And honestly, it's usually in the worst of worst situations. There's a reason why people see visions of God and angels and stuff when they are on the verge of death or at their rock bottom. And when I say rock bottom, I'm talking like gun in your mouth. You've just taken 3 bottles of sleeping pills or something like that, gun in your mouth. Or you just ran your car into oncoming traffic and you're now pinned in, your chest has collapsed and you're floating in and out of consciousness. But I would wager that we all have our God moment. I am lucky that I had my God moment through something that I chose myself. Like, I still feel like God met me there. I feel like God was like, hey, Andrew is taking this leap of, seriously, y'all, you when you're on ayahuasca, and I say this a lot, and I apologize for repeating myself, but when they say that you die, quote unquote, die on ayahuasca and mushrooms and stuff like that, like your ego death, you have no way of knowing that you're not really dying. Like, to you, it's real. That's the only way it works. If you are dying in your mushroom trip or your ayahuasca trip, and you have the thought of like, okay, this is that ego death die thing. Let me just get through this, right? Then it has no effect. It's like you have to really think you're going to die. And so I think that God met me halfway here. I think that God was like, hey, it's clear that Andrew needs me in his life. It's clear that anything that I try to throw in his way and try to give him a sign, he's not going to believe. And here he is realizing that he has a problem about belief. It's weird. It's so bizarre. It's such a puzzle to me. I realized that the lack of belief in anything was taking me down a terrible place. And I was like, but I don't want to believe in God, but I'm going to take this stuff anyway. And if I find God, then that's an issue, because again, I didn't believe in the guy, but I want something to snap me out of this. Right. And so if I'm God, I'm looking at this and being like, okay, Andrew knows that he has a problem with belief, and he is taking something that is incredibly risky. Like, the courage behind, here is a bottle of what the Amazonians called the death vine. Andrew is going to take 6 ounces. At one point I took 9. Andrew is going to, we'll go with 9 ounces. Andrew is going to drink 9 ounces of something called the death vine, where there is no guarantee at all what will be encountered. And everything that he has researched says that he is likely going to die figuratively. But in the moment on this stuff, you don't know it's figurative. So Andrew is signing up for death. That's how serious he is to help himself here. And he's lacking belief, and he knows it. I'm going to step in. I think that's what God did. I think God was like, okay, Andrew has the balls
to make that leap, I'm going to catch him. And the rest is history. The rest is history. I don't know where I'm leading. Oh, thank your drill sergeant, y'all. That's where I was going. That's where I was going. Is I am lucky that I didn't have to have a car crash, take a bottle of sleeping pills, and put a gun in my mouth moment for me to find God. I'm very grateful that I could control that. Whew, I'm talking a lot. I love you all. 47. Right when I look at that, it's 47. All right, y'all. I love you. I'll talk to y'all later.
In short, y'all, God is infinity. He is infinitely powerful, and he seems to have an infinite amount of other things going on. So just be happy that he hasn't blinked his eye and wiped all of us out yet. Furthermore, be happy and thankful that despite the infinite inequality between him and us, he cares. He cares enough to not only want us to be better and offer a way out of our misery, but he also loves unconditionally and will reward you. And not only that, he is the very origin of love and rewards itself. So be thankful and love God with all of your heart. And that's actually the number one thing that he wants, if Scripture is to be believed. And before you start complaining about how that's neither nice nor respectable for someone to demand praise, all I got to say is, number one, God is not just someone, okay? God is infinity. I heard this amazing saying one time, and it goes something like, God is that whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. I mean, that says it all for me right there. He is infinitely powerful and has not only created what we call reality, but also constantly weaves and holds all of reality together. But not only that, he does so in such a way that all participants in this woven reality live out a beautiful metaphor, a beautiful poetic stanza, a beautiful joke, with everything else in reality rolling up to collective jokes and then collective of collectives and so on, with it all culminating in God himself. And that's just the stuff that we know of and can imagine. From what I saw, he does infinitely more than even just that. Like I said earlier, all of that is just a tucked away little speck of dust. So if something like that is capable of all of that, wants a little bit of praise and wants you to be thankful for what you have, then fall on your freaking knees and give praise. Because no matter how bad you think you have it, it can be infinitely worse for you. Trust me on this, infinitely worse. And you know how I know this? Because I have both seen and felt it. I was practically held by the back of the head and drowned in it. So give praise. And while you're realizing that and giving God his due praise, which again is the number one thing that God wants us to do, also do the second thing that God wants us to do, which is love thy neighbor like you love thyself. Because if the opposite happens and we fight among each other, trust me when I say you do not want God to come down and break up the fight. Believe me. Okay, so we're finally done with ants, at least for now. I'm pretty sure that that analogy will resurface at some point, but for now, we're going to put these little ant fellas back into their little ant piles where they belong. I personally do not want to be thinking about ants for a solid at least 2 months here. But I promise in the interim, in that 2-month time span, we're going to have at least 2 more unpacking episodes coming out of this amazing, unbelievably mind-blowing ayahuasca experience that I had. And I'm not quite sure what the next topic will be.
I think there's still like, at least 2 more topics that I need to cover, probably even 3. But regardless, whatever happens, whatever comes your way here, I promise it's going to be awesome, okay? And for those of you who are sick of unpacking episodes and you wish there were more trip episodes, well, I may or may not have a surprise for you. Maybe a couple surprises for you. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I will see you all soon. Hey, I said you all right there instead of y'all. I'll see you all soon.